I'm thrilled today's guests, Noa Tishby and Emmanuel Acho. They are the authors of the New York Times bestseller, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew. I'm thrilled to have you guys here. Let's get into it.
What's up, Donny?
So who came to who?
All Emmanuel. It's literally all Emmanuel. So I let him tell. It's Emmanuel's idea. It's Emmanuel's initiation. Like, it's all Emmanuel. Go ahead, babe.
In this figurative bar, Donny, I walked up to Noa while she was getting a proverbial drink, if you will. No, Donny, about 2 years back, I said, why in the world are communities always fighting in silos? Man, I see black people fighting for black people. You see women fighting for women. You see Jewish people fighting for Jewish people. But Donny, I asked myself, what in the world would happen? How much more collectively powerful would our world be if rather than fighting in silos, Donny, we started fighting together? I said, why couldn't black people fight with and alongside Jewish people like it used to be in the 1950s and the earlier 1960s before the deterioration began to exist between those two communities? And Noa was one of the leading minds, leading voices in the conversation. She had a beautifully written book, like you mentioned, called Israel. I read that book. I realized her brilliance. She also just has it as it pertains to being a communicator. And about 2 years ago now, I reached out to her and the partnership began.
And this is no holds barred. There is no, I mean, if there's some uncomfortable reading in it, but it's all productive. You handle every anti-Semitic trope, every stereotype, you just kind of walk right into everything. And that's the genius of the book.
Yeah, that was the intention. I think that neither Emmanuel or I like to beat around the bush. We're very much kind of thorough people that don't that take our responsibility seriously. And I say this in the book, and I say this in life a lot. The only way out is through. And we live in a world today in which people don't want to have conversations. They're afraid. They don't know what they're talking about. There's trigger warnings up the wazoo, and people are just like tiptoeing around each other. And it makes no sense to me, especially when it comes to the Jewish community. There's so much going on right now with the Jewish community, with Zionism, with anti-Semitism. We have to talk about it. So when Emmanuel came up to me, and he literally came up to me, I just wanted to be clear, like, he came up to me way before the current moment.
What's going on? Yeah, that's interesting. You were ahead of the curve. Yeah.
Something that the Jewish community noticed, but nobody outside of the Jewish community actually noticed what was going on. And he came up to me to write this book, and he said, I want your community to know that relief is on the way. And I started crying immediately and said, yes, absolutely yes. And that's how this book happened. And the reactions have been incredible. First of all, we couldn't have hit the cultural moment better. And second, it's just people that read it now they feel very good about it. People love it.
What do they take it? What are they saying to you? Let's sell some books here. What are people, you say they feel good about it. Give me some of the net takeaways as far as, forget the way you want to sell it, the way people are receiving it.
I love that question, because I've been kind of stalking the Goodreads reviews and the Amazon reviews. And I think the things that stand out to me most are when people say this should be required reading. When people say, like, either A, as a Jewish person, I learned so much, or B, as a non-Jewish person, these were the questions that I wanted to ask, but I was afraid to, but now I've gotten so many answers. One of my favorite responses, somebody who read the book said, Emmanuel, how are you and Noa still friends? That was one of the first interviews that we did, with somebody inquiring how we were still friends. So I love all of the feedback, both from Jewish readers and from non-Jewish readers.
I mean, there is no question that you can't. You go like, didn't Jews kill Jesus? I mean, that's a thought starter.
We went there because if I'm being honest, and let's get uncomfortable, if you will, there are a lot of questions that I think are valid from the non-Jewish community, but people are afraid to ask them because of the cancel culture that we live in. People are afraid to ask them because if you ask it in an improper manner, or if you ask it on live television, you're labeled anti-Semitic. So I really wanted to ask Noa, let's talk about Jewish people and power, because again, the wealthiest hand that I've ever shaken was the hand of a Jewish man. The owner of my Philadelphia Eagles team was a Jewish man. When I was drafted to the Cleveland Browns, a Jewish man. My first television agent, a Jewish woman. My second television agent, a Jewish man. So I was
those Jews with all the fucking money. The Jews have all the money.
So, obviously, if you say that, you're in hot water. But Donny, I wanted to go there with Noa. I wanted to ask some of these questions that I personally feel like are incredibly valid. Are Jewish people white? Let's talk about it. And in this book, we really ask questions that I don't think you'll ever hear answered elsewhere.
Noa, what was the one thing that probably Emmanuel asked you that you were like, I can't believe you just did that. All right. I don't know how I'm going to answer that and not be on record and get myself in trouble for the rest of my life.
There was nothing that Emmanuel asked me that I didn't want to talk about. There was nothing that he asked me that I was offended by. There was nothing that was off limits. To Emmanuel's point, if this conversation would have been on Twitter, if he would have asked these questions or said these things on Twitter or on TikTok, he would have been crucified, to be kind of blunt, or online. This would have been horrible. But there was nothing that was off the table, and I loved it when he brought up, like, he wanted to bring up Jewish stereotypes. To me, that was one of the most exciting things. He's like, let's talk about Jewish stereotypes, and I'm like, let's. And it was amazing. So there was absolutely nothing. And I think, again, it's a very intense conversation. It's all the questions that if you're a Jew and you want to answer these questions, that's the book for you. If you're a non-Jew and you're kind of like looking at the current moment and being, what is happening here? This is the book for you. I'm very excited that we were able to have that conversation. And because when there's love and there's authenticity and there's openness, there's nothing
there's nothing you can't do.
Exactly.
There's nothing you can't do.
Exactly.
Emmanuel, you talked about earlier in the 50s, how blacks and Jews stood side by side with civil rights. And there's a lot of perceptions out there that in this time of trouble for the Jews and this new rise of anti-Semitism and hatred, that I've heard from Jewish people, well, we were there with Black Lives Matter, and there's been very quiet voices from the black community. How do you respond to that?
Man, that's really well said. And speaking to so many different black people, because obviously you have black color, you have black culture, and there's black people aren't a monolith. I think there's some of the sentiment is like, yes, I understand you were there, but where has that gotten us? Like some of that sentiment is that people still feeling as though progress has not been made. I also think, Donny, unfortunately, we allow individuals to represent the large. So we allowed Kyrie Irving and Kanye West and Dave Chappelle to make it appear as though there's greater tension than there truly is. We've allowed the Chicago chapter of Black Lives Matter to make it appear that there's greater tension than there truly is. Now, because of that appearance, I did want to step in the gap, if you will, because I'm like, no, I don't think this tension needs to exist. Now, if I'm being very, very, very frank, the polarity between the black community and the white community is about as sharp as it's ever been publicly recorded, in large part because of social media. And because we have grouped societally Jewish people into the white box, then the polarity between the black community and the Jewish community is as sharp as it's ever been, because the non-Jewish community, in my opinion, does not perceive the Jewish community as Jewish. They perceive the American Jewish community as white. And so long as American Jewish people are perceived as white, or European looking Jewish people are perceived as white, then it's not as though it's black and Jew, it's black and white. And there's a severe tension between the black and white community right now.
Noah, how did that, being that Israel is mostly not-white, how did this get started? Where is this because it's an oppressor-oppressed thing? Is it where is, I mean, if you follow the history, it's not hard to figure it out.
Yeah, look, if you follow the history, Jews and blacks are the two of the most oppressed communities historically ever. And this is one of the sources of the bond between us. We also have an origin story of slavery as a people. I mean, it's the bond between the Jewish and the black community in America is unparalleled in what we were able to achieve. And it's true that we're not in a great place, obviously, but you have to acknowledge it was better than it was 100 years ago, obviously. I think what happened in terms of the black and Jewish community, a couple of things happened. First of all, the goalpost moved. So the rules of the game have changed to judge a person by the character, but their personality, what's the content of their character, by even class or money, by any of these, by law degrees or any other degrees, by any kind of like parameter. They changed to two things. One of them is the oppressor oppressed, and the other one is melanin in the skin. And once you look at life through these two parameters, which to me are reductive and unhelpful, but also when you look at everything through these two parameters, these two kind of like lenses, the Jewish community does not fit. They don't fit. You can't put them in the oppressor oppressed, and you can't put them in the melanin for a couple of reasons. First of all, because throughout history, the Jewish community have not been afforded the same privileges that white Americans or white Christians were afforded throughout the years and throughout history and throughout colonialism. And second is that the majority of the Jewish community is not white. So it's only in America that that Jews are of Eastern European descent and are kind of white passing the majority. But when you go to Israel, I have a friend, I'm not going to say her name, but she's a black comedian actress. She went to Israel for the first time a couple of months ago. She called me after 48 hours. She's like, Noah, it's not
Where the white people? Where the white people?
it's not even a white country. And I'm like, I know. She's like, how do people think it's a white country? All you need to do is go there. Right now in Israel, only 31% of Israelis define themselves as of Eastern European descent. So even that, you just see it. And also, the Jews are not white. They're white. Some of them are white passing, but the Jews, it's not a religion. It's an ethno-religion. We are kind of like a tribe. It's an ethnic group in and of itself. And once the world changed like that, the rift between the Jewish and the black community became very extreme. There's also been outside interference, specifically with outside forces that are coming into BLM and have hijacked intersectionality to use it to kind of put, again, in the parameter, the Jews are the whites and the Palestinians are the brown. Not the right way to look at it at all. So this was intentional in addition to cultural, and both Emmanuel and I refused to let it be like that. And that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Emmanuel, you talk a lot about ignorance and the unknown and the fear of the other, which is interesting. When I asked both you guys last week on Morning Joe why people hate Jews throughout history, and that's the first place that you started.
Yeah, I think, it's the most honest place, Donny. I think it's the most honest place. Fear makes you do crazy things, and fear makes you do dangerous things. But I believe that proximity, it breeds care. Distance, it breeds fear. The dilemma is, if you don't know somebody, you'll be afraid of them. Let's go in the most basic sense. If it's midnight and each of us are leaving a restaurant, walking on our way home, and across the street, we just see a figure in a hood and a hoodie or whatever the case may be, we'll instantly be afraid. Man,
Sure.
woman, boy, girl, black, white, whatever the case may be, because we do not know what that figure or who that figure is across the street from us, we will become afraid. But let that person come closer and we see that it's our cousin, it's our niece, it's our nephew, it's our mom, it's our dad. Oh, hey, we'll greet him with an embrace. Same person, but because of a lack of proximity, we're afraid. And now because we're afraid, it might cause us to do different things. That's a very simplistic example of where we are in society. Society, we just don't know people. Go ahead, Donny.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
No, I was saying, societally, if I do not know a Jewish person, then I will just believe what people tell me about Jewish people. Money hungry, selfish. They're controlling the media. They're controlling the world. They have these little secret society groups. And I also believe, man, Donny, we're speaking different languages, man. Because even as Noah was speaking wonderfully, I was like, that's not how other people hear it. When you say, well, Jewish people are white passing, in America as a non-Jewish person, it's black and it's white. Like, it's that simple. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have taken all of the beautiful nuance of our world, of society, of the continents, of the countries of the globe. And in America, we've made it black and we have made it white. And because we've made it those two things, we've lost all of the nuance that Noah was saying. Wonderfully said, it's irrelevant to the non-Jewish community. What do you mean you're not white? Because you got afforded the luxuries in 2024 of looking white. So what you mean you're not white? Make that make sense. And that, I think, Donny, is a part of the rift.
So then if you go on the premise that a lot of it is ignorance and you don't know somebody, how do you build a bridge between these two groups when they don't know each other? Like I have friends who live in just completely white universes, and I see a real soft racism with it. They're not outward. It's not a hatred of black people, but it's like, I could just, I grew up in Queens. I grew up in a high school of 4,000 kids. I was bused one where people were busing. So for me, there was always a familiarity with the person of color, but I know so many people in my world that don't. And how do you get those worlds together when they don't naturally coexist?
That's a great question. I'll give a quick answer, and I'm so curious to hear Noah's as well. In that, I think you have to be intentional about making your world look diverse if it doesn't look diverse. I've said this, haven't said it in maybe a year now, but when America outlawed segregation, what it should have done instead was mandate integration. Right? People don't think about that very often. When you outlaw segregation, all you do is you take away the signs that you see, no blacks allowed, but instead of reading them out loud like a word in books in parentheses, you still read them in your heart and in your head. But if you would have mandated integration, now you mandate Emmanuel and Donny sit together. Now you mandate Noah and Emmanuel sit together. Now you mandate that we intermingle and intermix our lives. But if your world doesn't look diverse, you have to mandate it. But so many people, like my coach said, Noah, and like Donny, you're like water. You take the easiest route. If you pour water on the ground, it'll just take the path of least resistance. And I agree. When I get on Instagram, I see like little bachelor parties and bachelorette parties, and it's all white groups and it's all black groups. And I'm just like, do y'all even notice that like your world lacks any diversity? It's the craziest thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I wanted to ask you, you said something, shifting back to anti-Semitism for a second, because you gave an articulation of it that stuck with me, and Emmanuel, you re-brought it up on Morning Joe last week, that it's kind of a moving target. It comes from above and below and both sides.
Yes.
And I thought that was so brilliant. On the one hand, we're told that we're vermin, but on the other hand, we're above everybody, and we're bankers and we're lawyers and whatnot.
Yeah,
and then they're getting from both sides in terms of the extreme left and the extreme right.
Yeah,
that really stuck with me. That really stuck with me.
That's the interesting thing about anti-Semitism, which was one of the most fascinating, I think, to Emmanuel as well, conversations we had, that anti-Semitism is not as simple as racism. Anti-Semitism, the best way to describe it is a shape-shifting conspiracy theory. So it attributes to the Jews this mythological intent, right? It's either power or an intention to control the world, or you go back to literally like, you know, the Spain before the Inquisition and the protocols of the elders of Zion. They literally always attribute to the Jews this conniving, fifth column type of a thing, which can look as, oh, they're horrible, they're below us, but also they're above us and they're up to something no good. Right. And that's why it's hard, because as you said, it's a moving target. It's hard for people to pinpoint what that is. It's a very insidious, and that's why people can think that they're giving Jews a compliment when they say, well, the Jews, they're so rich. They control the media. And we're just like, whoa. Because historically, when you start believing these conspiracy theories about the Jews, and you start believing that the Jews have power or the Jews have too much power, the thing that preceded that in history is, well, we better take that power away from them. It's way too much power. And what preceded that was usually some sort of a massacre. So this can come, and today it shifted into Israel has too much power. Let's take that away from them. Because people are uncomfortable with Jewish, what they perceive as Jewish power. They're just uncomfortable with that. And to what you said about the soft racism, there's a soft anti-Semitism as well, because a lot of people don't think of themselves as that. They just go, oh, look, Israel is such a genocide state. And you look at them and you're like, that's just like numerically not true. But people are literally now convinced. Look at what's happening on campuses. They are convinced that Israel is committing a genocide in the Palestinian. Well, we need to stop. It's 200 days since the genocide began. Like they're talking about this colloquially as if it's true. And when you look at that and you think of that in the context of historically what the Jews have been through, right? In the olden days, people were also convinced that the Jews used blood of Christian children to bake matzahs. And there was like, of course it's true. In the same kind of manner that, of course, genocide of the Jews is true. And that's what I'm trying to kind of like make people step out of that matrix and see that for what it is, which is this subconscious bias that you carried around the Jewish people. It's affecting your ability to see facts from fiction.
Emmanuel, tell me what you learned in the book that can answer this question for me. There was speaking of campus protests, Noah, there was in Northeastern this weekend, so a guy came in and he had an intifada, the red hands, which symbolizes literally killing of Jews. And he gets up there, and which is horrific enough. But the head of the graduation, whoever was speaking on stage, was well-meaning, but said, we appreciate your passion. This is not the right place for it. Now, if somebody got up on stage and said, let's kill black people, nobody would say we appreciate your passion. It would not be, it's somehow there is a different grading for hate against Jews. That like literally said that. I'm actually posting something on Instagram from this morning. I talked about it on the air. It was like literally the guy's standing there with red hands, which means kill Jews.
Mean, Emmanuel, because we never talked about it.
No,
so
that's interesting. Yeah. Donny, I didn't know what the red hands meant.
So the red hands, there was a massacre in Ramallah a few years ago. There were two guys that accidentally drove into Ramallah, and they were taken and lynched by Palestinian mob, taken up to a room, an apartment building, lynched with knives, like slaughtered, Hamas style, jihadi style. And one of them walked out to the window and with bloodied hand. This happened like 10, 15 years ago, right? So not like in the 1800s.
More. Well, no, this was like early 2000s, early 2000s, 2001, right.
Modern day, right?
Yes.
He stepped out of the window and bloodied hand of this Jew that just like drove into a city and just like stood out the window with the hands, with blood in his hands, like, yeah, and the mob screaming. So these hands, the two hands, which are the ceasefire pins too, right?
Yeah, I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
These two hands are the hands with, like, it's a lynch of a Jew, basically. So, good
and
time.
So the long way around is that gets presented.
Yeah, it's presented as if it's like some peaceful thing. It's literally
oh, well, you appreciate your passion. It's just not the right time and place. Whereas if somebody came up and said, "Let's do some lynching," nobody would say, "We appreciate your passion."
Yeah.
The cops would be called and they'd be carried out by their feet.
It's interesting. I mean, what I found, I've heard the sentiment a lot, which is hard for me to speak to because I can't speak like as a Jewish person. I've heard the comparison. I've heard the sentiment a lot. I think to me, a lot of it is probably pervasive ignorance. So often, at least in America, if things are happening over there, we're just like, yeah, I feel bad. You want me to write a check?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll write a check. Cool. But we don't actually understand what is going on. Like, we really don't understand what's going on. To me, again, Donny, that's why Noah and I wanted to pen the book. I don't want to pivot this to the book, but that truly is why, because I didn't know what the red hands meant. So if I saw that, I might just be like, I don't know what that means.
I think that's the perfect answer.
Whereas you all, like, not only do y'all understand what it means, y'all have a visceral reaction to it. Whereas to me, I'm just like, I don't know whose blood it represents. I don't know who died. I don't know anything behind it. So I think so much of it is a lot of ignorance. Donny, going back to something you said maybe 7 minutes ago about your friends, a little bit of racism, I think there are categories. I think there's racism, I think there's racial ignorance, and I think there's racial insensitivity. And I think what we're talking about here could also be there's anti-Semitism, there's anti-Semitic ignorance. And so I think oftentimes ignorance also, though, it can play itself out as racism or anti-Semitism if it goes unchecked. But oftentimes I try to leave room at least for maybe you did not know, because I know there's a lot of stuff that I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's so perfect. It's so perfect.
Go ahead,
said, Donny, because Emmanuel has the best intentions in the world, and
how did you get so fucking decent? Where did this obscene decency come from?
Don't curse next to Emmanuel. I had to check myself so many.
By the way, I could tell Noah you're a little bit of an asshole like me. This is like the nicest guy on the planet. You know what I mean?
What is this? I don't think I'm an asshole. Like, I wouldn't go there, but I'm definitely
kidding. I'm kidding. You're not. Neither one of us are as nice as Emmanuel. Let's put it that way.
That's hilarious. That's
a very high bar.
That's hilarious. Honestly, truth be told, Donny, Noah's learned this. I'm just very, very curious. And I love the premise of, but what if we're wrong? Chuck Klosterman penned a book called But What If We're Wrong? And Donny, I live by that premise. Like, but wait, but what if we're wrong? What if they weren't racist? What if they were ignorant? What if we're wrong? Like, so everything I approach in life, I approach as, hey, but what in the world if we're wrong? And I try to navigate it from that perspective.
Okay, I'm going to let you guys go because you've been so generous with your time and how busy you are, but I'd like to sell...
Can I just say one more thing to Emmanuel's What If I'm Wrong?
Yeah.
If anybody that is currently in an encampment on college campus, just consider, what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
Just consider that.
Good luck with that. Yeah, they seem very open to discussion, you know. I want each one of you to sell the book. I want Noah, I want you to sell it to a overall audience, a male audience, a black audience, everything but a Jewish audience.
Okay, I like that. So if you are a curious person, if you're worried about anything that's happening right now, if you, like Emmanuel, saw the hate that was coming out or the ignorance from black men, this might answer your questions. This actually would be something that answers your question, because that's what Emmanuel was saying. He's like, I saw that a lot of black men were saying these things. And I was like, I'm a black man. I want to understand why what they're saying is wrong. What what can I do to figure out what's happening? If you're not a curious person, you don't read books. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm assuming you're a curious person. There's a very intense cultural moment that's happening right now. And if you're a curious person, you need to know what's up. So this is the book for you. And it's fun. It's fun. It's fun,
Emmanuel,
relatable, and it's an easy read. So, which is important for both of us.
All right, Emmanuel, take your swing.
For me, it's simple. You have questions and you've been afraid to ask those questions. And because you've been afraid to ask those questions, you haven't gotten your questions answered. And as a result, I believe that you, the listener, you, the viewer, have been navigating life not knowing what landmines you might intentionally or incidentally step on. And the beauty of this book is to let you know where the landmines exist and where the landmines don't exist. So you can better know for yourself how to navigate life, and you can better know how to navigate the world around you. So don't continue to live in the ignorance that you were born into and that you matured into. Get the answers, because rather than having to sit down with a plethora of Jewish people, rabbis, men, women alike, Noa and I sat down over the course of years for you, and we put it all in a 250-page book that you can both listen to or you can read. And as a result, if you don't have the answers, you can get the answers. And if you're on the receiving end of the question and you don't know how to answer, Noa has put in more time than you can imagine and has dedicated her life to answering the questions in the best way to be digested.
Well, guys, you both blow me away. Emmanuel Acho, Noa Tishby. The book is Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew. It is, if there was ever a book that was a book of the moment, this is the book. Go out and get it. It's destined to be a runaway New York Times, Amazon, intergalactic bestseller. It's just been out for a week, but already you guys are creating incredible waves with this. So thanks for taking the time. And how busy both of you guys are.
Thanks, Donny.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.